The rain hadn't stopped in 6 days, and neither had the questions. I stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom, staring at the closet where Diane's clothes still hung in neat rows, color-coordinated the way she always kept them. And I thought about how a woman who folded her sweaters into perfect squares could have kept an entire second life folded away from me for 11 years. The funeral had been on a Tuesday. I remember that detail with a strange, surgical clarity, the same way I remembered the exact shade of gray the sky had turned that afternoon, the same way I remembered the smell of lilies that would never leave my nostrils again, that thick funeral parlor sweetness that clings to the inside of your throat for weeks. Everyone had told me the same things. She's in a better place. She wouldn't want you to suffer. Time heals. I had nodded and shaken hands and let people hug me, and the entire time I had felt like I was watching myself from somewhere up near the ceiling, a stranger performing the motions of grief. Diane Whitfield Cole had been my wife for 11 years. She was a project manager for a mid-sized architecture firm in downtown Chicago, the kind of woman who color-coded her calendar and never missed a dentist appointment, and always remembered to defrost the chicken the night before. She drove a silver Honda CR-V that she'd bought used 4 years ago because she said new cars were a waste of money. And on the night she died, she was driving home from what she'd told me was a client dinner in Naperville when her car hit a patch of black ice on Route 59 and rolled twice before coming to rest against a guardrail. The police report said she died on impact. I clung to that detail the way you cling to a piece of driftwood in open water, circumflex the idea that she hadn't suffered, that there hadn't been a moment of terror before the end. I needed that to be true. It was 3 weeks after the funeral, on a gray Sunday afternoon when I finally worked up the nerve to go through her things, that I found the keys. They were in a small velvet pouch at the bottom of her jewelry box, beneath a false-bottom tray I hadn't even known existed until my fingers, moving almost on their own, pressed too hard against the felt lining and felt it give way. 2 keys, brass, unmarked except for a small paper tag tied to the ring with a length of red string. On the tag, in Diane's small, careful handwriting, was a single word: sanctuary. Beneath the keys was a folded piece of paper, and on that paper was an address: 2200 North Lakeshore Drive, Unit 41B. I sat on the floor of our bedroom for a long time after that, the keys cold in my palm, feeling something shift beneath my ribs that I couldn't yet name. Fear, maybe, or the first cold trickle of a suspicion I wasn't ready to have. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Diane had a sister, Marnie, who lived in Milwaukee, and I wondered if perhaps this was some property the two of them had jointly inherited from their mother, something Diane had simply never mentioned because it wasn't worth mentioning. I told myself a dozen stories that Sunday night, lying awake in the bed that had suddenly become too large, each story more reasonable than the last, and each one collapsing under its own weight by morning. 2200 North Lakeshore Drive was not the kind of building where you inherited a unit and forgot to mention it. I looked it up before I'd even had coffee. The Meridian Tower, 48 stories of glass and steel overlooking the lake, with a doorman, a private elevator bank for the upper floors, and units that started, according to the last public listing I could find for a comparable floor, at just under $2 million. I am a high school English teacher. Diane made more than me, certainly, but not enough more that either of us could have secretly purchased an apartment in one of the most expensive buildings in Chicago. Our joint accounts, which I checked obsessively for the next 2 days, showed nothing unusual. No large withdrawals, no mysterious transfers. Whatever this was, it existed entirely outside the financial life we had built together, which meant it existed in some other current, some tributary of her life that never touched the river I thought we shared. I didn't tell anyone. Not Marnie, not my brother, not my closest friend Tom, who had been checking in on me every few days since the funeral with the patient, careful concern of a man who didn't quite know what to say but knew he should say something. I didn't tell anyone because some animal part of me understood, before my conscious mind caught up, that whatever I found behind that door might not be something I could unfind. And once other people knew, there would be no controlling what happened next. I went on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks and 4 days after Diane died, wearing my gray overcoat because it was the closest thing I owned to something a person might wear to a building like that, though in retrospect I doubt anyone even looked at me twice. Doormen in buildings like the Meridian Tower are paid to notice everything and comment on nothing. 41st floor, please, I told the young man at the desk, and he simply nodded and pointed me toward a bank of elevators tucked behind a wall of dark marble, the kind reserved, I would later learn, for the building's most private residents. The ride up took less time than I expected and longer than I could bear. I watched the numbers climb: a circumflex 12, 19, 27, 33, a circumflex, and felt my heart doing something arrhythmic and strange in my chest, some tight fluttering that made me wonder, absurdly, if I might have a heart attack right there in that gleaming steel box, dying the way my wife had died, suddenly and without warning, leaving behind questions for someone else to unravel. The doors opened onto a small private landing with a single door, Unit 41B. I stood there for what felt like a long time before I put the key in the lock. I want to be honest about that moment, because I think it matters. A circumflex. I want to be honest about the fact that some part of me, standing outside that door with my dead wife's key trembling in my hand, understood that I was about to learn something that would either destroy the 11 years I thought I'd lived or explain them in a way I wasn't prepared for. There is a particular kind of dread that comes before a door like that. It is not the dread of the unknown. It is the dread of almost knowing, the dread of a shape you can already feel taking form in the dark, waiting only for light to confirm it. The lock turned smoothly, recently oiled, and the door swung open onto a space that took my breath away for reasons that had nothing to do with beauty, though the apartment was, in its way, beautiful. It was not what I expected. I don't know precisely what I had expected: a circumflex, a lover's hideaway, perhaps some den of an affair. Silk sheets and champagne flutes and the ghost of another man's cologne. What I found instead was something stranger and, in its own way, far more unsettling. The apartment was enormous, a sprawling corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the black expanse of Lake Michigan, the lights of the city smeared and doubled in the wet glass. But it was nearly empty of furniture. A single leather armchair sat near the window. A drafting table, the kind architects use, occupied one corner, covered in rolled paper and rulers, and a small collection of mechanical pencils arranged with obsessive precision. And on every wall, every single wall, from the entryway to the kitchen, to what must have been a bedroom down a short hallway, a circumflex, there were photographs. Not photographs of me. Not photographs of our life together, our wedding, our trip to Portugal, the house we'd bought in Oak Park. These were photographs of a life I didn't recognize. Diane, younger, standing on scaffolding in what looked like a construction site in some coastal city, her hair shorter, her smile different, a circumflex wider, freer, unguarded in a way I rarely saw at home. Diane in what appeared to be a hospital, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Diane standing beside a man I had never seen before, a tall man with sandy hair and kind eyes, both of them laughing at something outside the frame, on what looked like a boardwalk somewhere warm. I walked the length of that apartment like a man moving through a museum dedicated to a stranger, my footsteps echoing on the bare hardwood, my hands shaking so badly I had to stop twice and press them flat against the cool glass of the windows to steady myself. In the bedroom, I found a wall of built-in shelving, and on those shelves, meticulously labeled boxes, not decorative boxes, archive boxes, the acid-free kind used for preserving documents, each one labeled in Diane's handwriting with a year: 2009, 2010, 2011, all the way through to the present. I opened 2009 first, because it was the earliest, because some part of me needed to understand where this other life had begun. Inside, I found a birth certificate. A name I didn't recognize, A circumflex Eleanor Grace Voss A circumflex, born in San Diego, California, to a mother named Diane Voss and a father whose name had been left blank. The date of birth made the child, if she were still alive, 17 years old. I sat down on the bare floor of that bedroom and did not move for a long time. Diane had a daughter born 4 years before we met, a daughter she had never once mentioned in 11 years of marriage, 11 years of pillow talk and anniversary trips and late-night conversations about whether we should try to have children of our own, conversations in which she had always, gently, deflected a circumflex she wasn't sure she wanted kids. She'd say she liked our life the way it was, just the two of us, and I had believed her. I had believed every word. Because why would I not believe the woman I loved? I went through the boxes one by one that night, and the picture that emerged was not the picture of an affair. It was something else entirely, something I am still not sure I have fully understood even now, months later, even after everything that followed. Before she was Diane Whitfield, before Chicago, before me, Diane had been Diane Voss, a young architecture student in San Diego who had fallen in love with a man named Peter Reyes, gotten pregnant at 23, and given birth to a daughter she named Eleanor. The photographs showed a young family, tender and unremarkable, the kind of photographs that exist in every family's shoebox. But somewhere around 2011, the photographs changed. Peter Reyes disappeared from the frame entirely. And in a folder marked simply Records, I found the paperwork, A circumflex, a custody arrangement, heavily redacted in places, transferring primary guardianship of Eleanor Grace Voss to a woman named Carol Ann Prescott, listed as the child's paternal grandmother. There was a letter, undated, in Diane's handwriting, that I found folded inside that folder, and I want to reproduce, as best I can recall it, the substance of what it said, because it is the closest thing I have to understanding why my wife lived 2 lives and let me love only one of them. She wrote that she had made a choice that no mother should ever have to make, that Peter's family had resources and stability that she, at 24, drowning in student debt and grief after Peter's sudden death from an undiagnosed heart condition, simply could not provide. She wrote that Carol Ann had offered to raise Eleanor as her own, in the house Peter had grown up in, surrounded by his family, his name, his memory, a circumflex, and that Diane, in the depths of a grief I could only imagine, had agreed, believing it was the only way to give her daughter the life she deserved. She wrote that she had promised Carol Ann she would step back, would not interfere, would not confuse the child with a mother who came and went, a circumflex, but that she could not make herself disappear entirely. So she had rented this apartment, this one small corner of the world, where she could keep every photograph Carol Ann sent her twice a year, where she could keep the letters, the report cards, the single lock of hair from Eleanor's first haircut, sealed in a small glass vial that I found on the bookshelf, wrapped in tissue paper gone soft and yellow with age. She wrote that she had never told me, and here the letter grew harder to read, because I could feel Diane's handwriting changing, growing tighter, more controlled, the way handwriting does when someone is trying very hard not to cry while they write. She said she had never told me because she was afraid, a circumflex, afraid that I would see her differently, afraid that I would think less of her for the choice she'd made, afraid, more than anything, that I would ask her to stop coming here, to let this last thread to her daughter go, and that she did not think she could survive that. I do not know how long I sat on that floor. I know that at some point the sky outside those enormous windows began to lighten from black to a bruised, ashen gray, and I know that by the time the sun came up over the lake, I had made a decision that surprised even me. I was not going to hate her. I want to be honest about the anger, because it was there, sharp and immediate. In the first hour, a circumflex, the anger of 11 years spent building a life with someone who had kept an entire wing of herself locked away from me, who had let me believe in a version of her that was, I now understood, only half true. There is a particular kind of betrayal in discovering that the person you loved most in the world thought you incapable of loving all of her. That she trusted a locked door and a rented apartment more than she trusted me. But grief, I have found, has a way of burning through anger faster than you expect, leaving behind something quieter and more complicated. Because as the sun rose that morning, what I felt most was not betrayal. It was sorrow, a circumflex, a deep, aching sorrow for a 24-year-old woman I never knew, standing in a hospital room somewhere, making an impossible choice, and then spending the next 17 years quietly, secretly, mourning a daughter she had given away in an act she must have believed, in her darkest moments, was either the greatest love or the greatest failure of her life. Perhaps both. I found Alina 3 months later. It took a private investigator, a man named Russo who worked out of a cramped office above a laundromat in Cicero, and who did not ask questions he did not need answered. 4 weeks and a fee that emptied a chunk of savings I no longer had the heart to protect. Alina Grace Prescott, a circumflex. She had taken Carol Ann's married name at some point. A circumflex was 17, a junior at a high school outside San Diego, and by all accounts of the life Russo was able to piece together, happy. She played water polo. She wanted to study marine biology. She had Diane's exact smile, the same one from the photographs on that apartment wall, wide and unguarded. A smile I now understood. I had married a woman who had spent the last decade of her life quietly grieving the loss of. I have not contacted her, not yet. I don't know if I ever will or if it is my place to. Grief, I have learned this past year, does not always give you clean answers. Sometimes it hands you a key to a door you never knew existed, and behind that door is not betrayal but a wound so old and so carefully hidden that finding it feels less like an ending and more like the discovery of a country you never knew your wife had been born in, one whose language you will spend the rest of your life slowly, painfully, learning to translate. I still have the apartment. I pay the rent on it myself now, quietly, out of an account no one else knows about, because I have come to understand something about Diane that I never understood while she was alive, a circumflex, that some griefs are too large to live inside the house you share with the people who love you. Some griefs need a room of their own, a sanctuary, a place where a person can go to be, fully and without apology, everything they cannot let themselves be anywhere else. Some nights I go there myself. I sit in the leather armchair by the window and I look out at the lake, black and vast and endless, and I try to imagine my wife sitting in that same chair. 17 years of secret Tuesdays and Thursdays, 17 years of a mother's grief folded into perfect squares, the way she folded everything, so that no one would ever have to see the mess underneath. I have not told Marnie. I have not told Tom. I do not know some days if I will ever tell anyone at all, because I have come to believe that this is the last gift I can give my wife, a circumflex, the thing she was too afraid to ask of me while she was alive. Not forgiveness, exactly, though there is that too, slow and imperfect and still arriving in pieces some mornings when I wake up and forget, for one merciful half-second, that she is gone. What I can give her is this. I can keep her secret the way she kept it, gently, without judgment, until the day, a circumflex, if it ever comes, a circumflex, that Alina Grace Prescott decides she wants to know where she came from. And when that day comes, if it comes, I will be the one standing at the door of a small apartment on the 41st floor of a building on North Lakeshore Drive, holding 2 brass keys on a ring with a scrap of red string, ready to let her in. I think in the end, that is what love actually is. Not the absence of secrets, not some clean, unbroken transparency that exists only in the stories we tell ourselves about marriage. It is the choice you make, standing in a doorway with the truth finally spilling out around your feet, to keep loving the person who kept it from you, a circumflex, to understand that the parts of them you never got to see were not proof that they loved you less, but evidence of just how much unbearable weight a single human heart can be asked to carry alone. The rain finally stopped on a Tuesday, 9 days after I found the keys. I remember standing at our bedroom window a circumflex my window now, though I still think of it as ours a circumflex watching the clouds break apart over the rooftops of Oak Park, and I remember thinking that grief is its own kind of secret sanctuary, a room we build inside ourselves, a locked door that no one else can open, no matter how much they love us. I think Diane would forgive me for finding hers. I have to believe that. It is, some days, the only thing that gets me out of bed. And somewhere in San Diego, a 17-year-old girl with her mother's smile keeps swimming laps in a pool at dawn, unaware that 400 miles east of the apartment where her mother once wept over old photographs, a man she has never met is quietly, carefully, keeping a light on for her, in case she ever comes looking for the door.